Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the voice of global supply chain. Supply Chain Now focuses on the best in the business for our worldwide audience, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and today's critical issues, the challenges and opportunities. Stay tuned to hear from those making global business happen right here on Supply Chain Now.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Scott Luton and special guest host Jenny Froome with you right here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's show. Jenny, how you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing wonderful. We got two of our favorite people here with us today, and we're gonna formally introduce one of our favorite repeat guests in a minute, Jenny. But I'm pretty stoked about today's conversation. How about you?
Yeah, me too. I love talking to this special guest.
I do too. So. On today's episode, we're continuing our supply chain leadership across Africa series in conjunction, of course, with Jenny Froome and our friends at SAPIX. Jenny, as you may recall, serves as COO of the SAPIX organization, doing wonderful work from a professional development and networking standpoint. Really, I'd call it not just best practice dissemination, but insights, market intel. How can we get through these challenging times, not just from a supply chain standpoint, Jenny, but a global business standpoint, right?
Community,
that is right. And team, because together everyone achieves more, right, Jenny?
Yep.
See, we're learning from a couple of our past conversations. So you can learn more about SAPIX at sapix.org. So with that said, I want to formally welcome in our wonderful guests here today. We've enjoyed a variety of past discussions. Get ready to be inspired and informed. I want to welcome back Ramatu Abdulkadir, aka the Supply Chain Maestro. Ramatu, how you doing?
Thank you, Scott. I'm doing great. And Jenny, it's so nice to catch up with you two once again. And I'm excited to be on this show again.
Well, we had to track your agent down. She was dodging us because your schedule's so crazy, but we finally nailed down the date, and it's great to have you back. Jenny and Ramatu, we blink and months go past. So the last time you were with us, Ramatu, was episode 673, which we released on the 5th of July, 2021. So it's a few months back. Tell us, what have you been up to since, Ramatu?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Well, it's been crazy for the past few months. Yeah, I've continued with my research. If you recall my on the last show, I told you about my research and some of the findings from my research. But immediately after that, we started planning for the third African conference on operations and supply chain management in Kigali, Rwanda. And that was my first in-person conference after COVID. And it was so exciting. And also I was very anxious because it's been long that I went for any conference and with COVID testing. And I just wasn't sure what it was going to be like. You get tested before you leave. Once you get to Kigali, you get tested. I think I had like 5 to 6 tests just going through that process, but it was well worth it, considering that I met a lot of researchers from all over the world and people from everywhere in Africa doing so many exciting research. And so it was really worth it going through all those COVID tests to meet those people and network, and also look at opportunities of collaboration on research, especially on the African continent, to try and see how we can fix some of the problems that we are battling with. Yeah, so it was really great having that conference last 2 weeks. And, now I'm looking forward to.
Really quick, that was the TEDx conference focused on operations, and what was the other topic?
So that was the third African conference.
The third
on operations and supply chain management in Kigali, Rwanda.
Gotcha. I'm thinking like TED Talks. Sorry, I got you. A third. Okay, I'm with you now. I'm a little bit slow sometimes for my two. And you were talking about how you really appreciated the opportunity to basically compare notes and compare research with a lot of other leaders about some of the challenges inherent to Africa. What is one what's one challenge in particular, and maybe even non-COVID related, because I think the whole world has got plenty of challenges, but what is one challenge in particular you really enjoyed your conversations around at this conference?
Yeah, so I think aside from some of the researches that were focused on, so we had some researches focused on the aerospace industry in Tanzania. We had some also were focused on the agric and food logistics supply chain, looking at landlocked countries, East African countries, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Tanzania, and how they were managing with COVID, and also the huge and rising cost of transportation. There was also some research on electoral logistics, which was very interesting because we're approaching elections in Nigeria. Very soon in 2023, we'll be having our elections, and there was a research on that, which really caught attention of people. I also found it very exciting, but I think I will have to give it to the agric supply chain, because right now with the rising cost of food and just increasing level of poverty, so having research on agri supply chain is, I think, is critical at this stage that we find ourselves. So that was, I was really interested in those researches that were focused on agri supply chain.
So Jenny, bringing you in here, that's just the tip of the iceberg, and those are some very weighty challenges. What does that bring your mind to? What thoughts come to your mind as Ramatu kind of walks through some of that?
Yeah, so much. I mean, immediately I go to the food security aspect, and at our own conference in August this year, we had Yeko Mas, who's been on the show, talking about, you know, how do we know where our food comes from, and you know what's in our food. And I think that is one of those big questions that we all have. And then there's also the food wastage that goes on, not just on the continent, but in the world. And it's horrific. And so any research that can go into that. The other thing, Ramatu, that you mentioned about the electoral supply chain, I can remember when I first started working with SAPIX, we had the Independent Electoral Commission become members of SAPIX. And I can remember thinking, why on earth would they want to be members of a supply chain organization? And then you stop and you think about the logistics and the supply chain around the whole elections and the whole process. And it really is, it's quite a feat that I think a lot of people do take for granted.
Well said. Well said, Jenny. Ramatu, you want to respond to that for a second? And then Jenny, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into where Ramatu's been spending her time. Any thoughts there, Ramatu?
Yeah, I think that's very correct in terms of food wastages, and this is all closely connected to the transport logistics systems. And I think there was a lot of discussions around use of technology to improve these supply chains, which is really good. Also, looking at e-commerce, there was a lot of discussions around sustainability and how to ensure that we minimize the wastages in the supply chain right now. So I think that just having people really focusing and researching those areas to try and come up with innovative solutions will really help Africa right now towards our economic recovery.
Outstanding. Well, you know, if they've got Ramatu involved, Jenny, they got the best and the brightest. And I know we can make some progress on some of these big challenges. All right. So Jenny, where are we going next with our dear friend Ramatu?
Yeah, I was going to ask something that really I find quite thought-provoking is this discussion and knowing how passionate on the continent people are about education and qualifications and getting as many, not letters after your name just for the sake of letters, but learning. I was quite intrigued by the discussions going around that several large organizations now in their recruitment plans are going to stop asking for degrees. they're going to ask be more interested in aptitude. Now, for me, as somebody who is definitely, the letters after my name are QBE, which is qualified by experience, and that's it. It's music to my ears, but I just wonder how you feel about that, and whether you think that will sort of take the edge off people wanting to get degrees.
For me personally, I don't think that will affect anything looking at the short term, because I think it's a great thing that these companies are doing. Experience is very important, and knowing or being able to solve problems, for me, I think that's the most important thing. But we also have to look at how our education systems have been designed. So it's one thing to say, I wouldn't be asking for certificates or degrees, but it's another thing to look at the entire system more holistically. But when you're looking at it from the perspective of an employer, definitely if I was employing, I'll be looking for people that can do the job. I don't care about the number of certificates you have. It doesn't make any difference as long as you cannot deliver any value to the customer or to the end user of my product or services. So that is very important. And depending on where you stand on that, also in terms of looking at education. So for me, I don't see education as just having degrees and all that. I think education goes beyond having degrees. There's so much to learn, and there's learning by experience, like you talked about. There's travel experience. People just absorb this knowledge. So for me, learning is beyond getting a certificate. Certificate is just one of it, but I think the main thing is being able to create solutions to the problems that we face. And if people that have experience are out there to do it, why not? Why won't we take them? Of course, as a CEO or any CEO in any industry, you would want somebody that can do the job. It doesn't matter if it comes with degrees or without degrees and all that. So for me, I'm a pragmatist when it comes to that. Get things done, whatever it takes to get things done. And that's what I believe we should be doing.
And both of y'all make great points there. And I think one of the, just my observation, whether it's remotely accurate or not, I think that in this era where selling certifications, selling degrees, the industry boom related to that, I think somehow we've trained students that, hey, you focus on getting that degree or that certification, and jobs and opportunity are going to come with it. And some of that's true, right? Some of that is true. There's value there. However, I would argue, as we're talking about folks that can get the job done, I think Ramatu is how you put it, those students that really apply themselves to the industry, engage, where it's more about the overall journey, educational journey, and where they see their wherewithal impacting current industry. And then that in conjunction with a degree, with a certification, whatever it is, I think those are the folks that are probably most valuable to the hiring managers out there, because it's not just the fact that they were able to pass this test or that test, get through that, the educational, check the boxes there, but it's how they change who they are and really are able to bring more value to the table, because they've got the textbook training, but then they've applied it to what they're seeing and experiencing in industry. So I don't know if that makes sense, but we've seen a lot of that out in industry. And Jenny and Ramatu, all of us have been involved in networking groups, for a long time. And I think we've all probably rubbed elbows with folks that just laser focused on just that additional LinkedIn accomplishment, thinking that a positive Pandora's box was going to open up, and it doesn't quite work like that, right?
No, it doesn't work like that. And I think also looking back at some of the projects I've worked on, we've seen these problems where people have certificates but cannot really add any value to the job. And that's why we try to work with some universities then in Kaduna State and trying to bring experience now, real life experience to learning. So, and that's why I say it has to do with the way our education is designed. They're designed to produce people that own certificates, which is wrong, really. We should produce graduates that have hands-on experience of the industry, that are market ready, that can go out there today and begin to solve problems, innovate, and think of new ways of doing things. So it's the focus and the design. There's a disconnect in our education system, and I think we need to really go back and look at that. What is the problem? Are we just out to get certificates, or do we want to get people out there that can do things, that can move products and solve problems?
Well stated.
Yeah.
Jenny.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we just did our young professional student conference a couple of weeks ago. And that whole idea came through really loud and clear, was that one of the roles I think that professional associations like SAPICS can actually fill is that work ready, is connecting the dots, is making the working people deal with the students and actually help to prepare them for what it is that's coming up. And we had one young man who had been a member of SAPICS who actually got a job interview purely because, not purely, obviously his CV looked good too, but the edge was given because he was a member of a professional association. And so, that for me is great to see employers recognizing the value of network, community, etc., and what that can bring.
I love that, Jenny. What a great point. Both, and I love going back to your point, Ramatu, about holistically evaluating our educational programs, and it's more than programs. It's how are we educating that vital pipeline of talent at all levels, right? So I think that's going to be a big lesson learned, and with action items getting through the COVID time. As I know, Jenny, kind of moving next with Ramatu. I think you got some questions around that, right?
Well, I was just really interested, first of all, to hear you talk, Ramatu, about after COVID, because, here in South Africa, we're still very much in the middle of it, not the middle, we're kind of on the cusp of, and everybody's now hypothesizing about the fourth wave, et cetera, But how have things been in Nigeria? I get such sort of mixed messages, and from your perspective, I know you touched on a while ago just about sort of being able to be involved in the initial vaccine rollout. How have things sort of evolved in the year and a half, actually, I think, since that happened?
So I think the vaccine rollout has been pretty successful, depending on how you look at it. At least there are vaccines in the hospital. I've been there, I'm fully vaccinated, so I've seen how it works and all that. Well, I think the bigger problem we have on our hands now is the vaccine hesitancy now. So you have the vaccines and people are not interested in taking the vaccine. So that's something that also needs to be solved. But I think that it's not only peculiar for COVID vaccine. We've had that problem with other vaccine, and it all boils down to education also. So, and trust in the system. So when people don't trust the system, they are not likely to go out there and get vaccines. So it might be easier for those of us that are public healthcare professionals. We have more information and to be able to make informed decision. But unfortunately, that is not true for everybody else. So now we have to struggle with getting everybody out there to get vaccinated. And so vaccine hesitancy is still a big deal. There are people that feel they don't need the vaccines and all that. So we need to continue to work in terms of sensitization and also showing people that it's safe to get these vaccines, and so that they can go out there and get the vaccines.
Trust is, as we all know, is that universal accelerant to almost anything, right? When you got trust involved in a relationship or a product or a partnership or you name it, we can move faster and have greater impact. And it sounds like Ramatu, we do have more heavy lifting to do in that regard. Okay, Jenny, we were talking pre-show about how the supply chains. I thought you had a great question. How supply chains for other diseases have coped with all of, everything that's being pointed and directed towards, the battle against COVID-19. Ramatu, any comments or observations there?
So the supply chains for other medicines are not coping, just like every other supply chains. People are running out of drugs and so many health supplies. Of course, the challenges of the ports in countries, containers, shortages of containers, and just moving products from manufacturers down here, especially that we do not have a lot of manufacturers. So we have to ship a lot of our products from China. So that's a problem here because, and also the rising cost of shipment. It's a problem. Products are going up really fast, and we're trying to look at it's not even comparable. So you can't compare it to pre-COVID in terms of cost. So, and that is a problem for people. So you need to get medicines, and those medicines are not available, or they are just too expensive for people to be able to get them. So that is impacting on access and affordability, and that is a huge problem, because what it means is that we're going to be having problems with other diseases. So there are other diseases, diabetes, hypertension, and even before COVID, the drugs were expensive, and now they're even getting even more expensive. And so as healthcare professionals, we have to be able to engage people and even policymakers to see how these medicines can be made available for the people that really need them.
And I think it's also, measles is going to be all these vaccines that we've sort of taken for granted again, that suddenly people had a choice. A lot of people in some countries made the decision not to, but in certain countries, you can't even have a choice because they're just not available. And so therefore these sort of things are going to come out again and resurface. And I know that also birth control has been, all the contraceptives have also been, supply has been disrupted drastically in various countries as well. Not just, because of COVID, but also because of infrastructure challenges as well.
So I want to shift gears to some good news, Ramatu.
Yeah.
Some good news, because as you lay out there, I bet a lot of folks hadn't even thought about, and I'm guilty as charged, hadn't even thought about the supply chains behind, other diseases, conditions, the products and medicines, everything that addresses the slew of things that impact us all. So that's a great call out there. But on a much brighter note, positive note, Ramatu, last time we were chatting with you back in June, you talked about, this opportunity in your career here to focus on research, right? And to, deliberately and intentionally be that student of supply chain once again, despite everything you already know and being the expert that you are in your own right. So what has it been like for you to have this opportunity to really spend your time studying global supply chains?
It's been an exciting period for me. And I believe that the research I'm working on, it's going to really help the healthcare supply chains in Nigeria and even globally, because people can learn from what we've done and how we've done things to be able to fix their own problems. So aside from the challenges of rising costs of medicines because of transportation costs and every other things, and difficulty in getting raw materials and all that. So because I'm working on performance management in my supply chain and trying to look at areas that we can maximize and reduce wastages. So it's very important that the resources that we have, resources are always scarce. They are not available all the time. So we have to deploy them to the most critical areas of healthcare. If we have shortages in some areas, so let's say we have medicines for hypertension, and every time we're rolling out new medicines and they just keep coming out and they just keep rolling out more medicines from the manufacturers. Now it's important to really prioritize the medicines that we need to get, because we don't have money to buy everything. but we can try to get things that are very important to save lives, those essential medicines that we can focus on. And Jenny talked about family planning medicines. Those have been scarce, even pre-COVID. They've been very difficult to get them in the market, and also the cost of getting them is expensive. But these are all areas that government and policymakers can focus attention now and try to get those medicines out for people to use. And measuring the performance is important because we have huge wastages in the system. And I believe if we can reduce those wastages, we'll be able to have more products available for people. Jenny also talked about infrastructure, very important, storage of medicines, transport networks, ensuring that medicines get to the last mile in the best condition that they should be is also very important, or else we'll have medicines that have lost their potency and they're just placebos or something for people to take. So all these are factors that if we can concentrate on them, and as researchers, we can sensitize people about how to work with the resources that you have, areas you need to focus on in terms of your improvement plans to be able to improve the overall network performance.
Okay. And it just reminded me that was a big thrust of what we talked about last time, continuous improvement, right? Rather than fighting in the moment to put out the fire or solve this problem, or, blocking and tackling that, they get so much of our attention. Hey, how can we elevate and optimize the overall performance? What metrics are we not looking at that we should be looking at? Was one of the big lessons, or one of the big things we talked about last time, Ramatu. All right. So Jenny, when you hear that and you hear what Ramatu just kind of rattled off there, what are some of your thoughts that come to your mind?
I think I continue to go, whenever I talk supply chain to other people, I'm continually reminded of a kind of a really big COVID silver lining, in that everybody's starting to understand more about what it is that happens within the supply chain. And, we've all become using terminology that we never thought we would. I mean, I never used to use the word efficacy in my whole life. And now you start talking about vaccines and how they must be stored and at what temperature. And all of a sudden, ordinary people are experts. And I think that it has huge value, and we've got to capitalize on that. And the research that you're doing, Ramatu, is going to change that exponentially, because now we've got stuff backed up by fact. And I think that's always the most important thing, is that it's very easy to quote. And I think the vaccine hesitancy has got something around that, with all the misinformation that's happening and people dealing with emotion. And talking with emotion and not based on fact. And I think that, that's where researchers are so, underestimated in a way, because what you do gives us the facts on which we can base our conversations.
Well said. And I would argue that the supply chain has been disrupted as well. Those shelves that had plenty of facts, they've been empty at times. So, but you make such a great point, because inherently there's a ton of emotional emotion and how we feel and how we're perceiving, this crazy time we're getting through. But the facts and the science and the concrete information that we can lean on to make decisions is so important. Ramatu, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's really important. At the beginning of COVID and much later on when the vaccines came out, I was really surprised when some people started calling me, and these are not people that we talk with frequently, asking, what do I think about the vaccines? Are they safe? And for me, I was working then in the supply chain, but not really on the COVID vaccine angle. And these were people that were very concerned, and they wanted to know my opinion in terms of taking the vaccines based on all the misinformation out there. And I think this is a gap that supply chain professionals can feel in terms of being out there, putting out the right information, encouraging people, and also researching. It's very important, sifting through the massive misinformation out there and knowing what's right, what is the truth, and what is not, based on evidence and critical information that is also out there. Sifting through that information is one of the roles that we can play by disseminating the right information out to people, because that is our traditional role. But I think it's even more critical with COVID now. We have to tell people what is the right thing. So I've had people tell me, okay, so which of the vaccines should I take? Is it Moderna? Is it AstraZeneca? You know, and it's such a huge challenge for professionals right now also. And everybody is looking up to credibility in terms of figuring out a way forward. So I think it's very important that we put ourselves even more out there, but we can't do it without research. Going through all those information, sifting them, and disseminating the right informations to the public.
Excellent point. And going back to kind of one of your earlier comments, I think I agree with you. Supply chain practitioners and professionals are already kind of, their mindset is, hey, let's get all the data on the table. Let's get the facts on the table. Let's figure out what we're dealing with first. And then from there, we put our action plan or countermeasures together. That's just part of, who we are as practitioners. And I think, to your point, Ramatu, that's been one of the most challenging aspects to all of this, because at times there hasn't been that aligned central set of facts and truths to rally around. And I know that Jenny, you and I have talked about that before. So anyway, great comment there, Ramatu. All right, so Jenny, you and I both kind of moving right along. Ramatu, you've talked about your family and your daughters. I want to kind of move to a more of a personal note. I think you have 3 daughters, and Jenny and I can relate as mothers and fathers as well. And I think, observing. Well, I'll call it observing some days. Other days, in terms of how they react. Other days, it's been coping and putting up, maybe tolerating, some of their responses to this, that, and the other. And I'm kind of, as I say all that, I'm maintaining that sense of humor has been really important here. But how have your daughters, Ramatu, handled the pandemic and all that it has brought?
I don't think that they handled anything. They've been very cranky. I think that's what they've been. It's confusing even for adults. So for kids, of course, there's that fear of the unknown. So they've never experienced this. I have also never experienced a pandemic in my lifetime. So I could imagine what the kids were going through. So it was a difficult period for the kids. And we had to step in as parents to see how we can make it more bearable, because that's all we can do, make it more bearable. And now that schools are back, of course, there's a lot of lost lessons. So many lessons have been lost in between, and students are still trying to cope with the times that schools have been locked down. Even though there's been e-learning and all that, it's a steep curve for kids, and as a parent, you also have to be there going through the lessons side by side with them. So it's been very difficult for this generation of young people. And I know that it has really impacted the way they even think also and see life, because now you have to go to school with face masks and sanitizers, and these are supplies that we never had to buy before, and you have to keep on educating them also on the importance of hand washing and mingling with people, why it's important to stay away. And for children, they just don't understand that. It's difficult. Like, why can't I play with my friends whenever I want that? So I think those category of people have been hit harder than everybody else. But as parents, we can only support them through it. And that's what we've been doing all through the pandemic.
Jenny, any of your thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had our 22-year-old son he came home for Christmas, and he was still here until day before yesterday, because he's supposed to be studying in Spain. And, you know, there's a reason why 22-year-olds aren't still supposed to be living at home with their parents. And it's been a very special time, but it's also been a very frustrating time. And it's been fascinating watching how they've become so immensely responsible, way beyond their years, I think, in understanding the do's and don'ts, and also going back to that whole understanding of the efficacy of the vaccines and which ones, and all of this research that they themselves have done, so as not to rely on the perils of social media. And I think that to a degree, there are a lot of very, very responsible young people out there who've been put through a very difficult time. Agreed. And as you say, as parents, all we can do is support and try to be as strong as we can be.
You know, I would add, just where I see this, one of the silver linings, you know, we thought, you know, on one hand, we really thought we had a resilient, strong, vibrant supply chains. And then we see how fragile many aspects of that in reality, as the pandemic has tested it once again. On the flip side, I think as a parent of three, you think about how, you know, small your kids are, they're learning, perhaps you can use that same fragile description. But then I think what I've seen is, despite all the challenges that you both point out, and new challenges, they got the challenges of just being a kid, right, fitting in, and social pressure and all that stuff that are timeless, and then they've got these unique challenges that none of us had to deal with. But the silver lining from what I see is that these kids are more resilient than I ever thought pre-pandemic. And it's amazing how it's like little micro studies in leadership. It might sound cheesy, but I'm telling you, I've got a whole newfound respect for how these kids have navigated and persevered and just dealt with, you know, even those times, Ramatu, when we couldn't make it better for them and we couldn't lessen the burden, and we lose sleep at night. The kids fight through it, and they're troopers. And so yeah. But Ramatu, I think as parents, none of that makes it any easier, right? Because there are kids, we don't want them to have a bad day, right?
Yeah, and I think that you're very right. The kids are even more resilient now. And just like Jenny said, they've had to grow up faster, really, because taking on a lot of responsibility because of the COVID and all that, in terms of their lessons, and even thinking about their careers now, because things are different. So some of the things that were important before COVID suddenly are not even important anymore. Even career choice is different for people. You have to think about what you want to do. And like I said, for us as parents, is just to continue to support. We can't be too imposing because we've never been through this lived experience before. So for the child, the way they interpret this situation is different from how we interpret it. And so we're likely to see more kids coming up with different things. I've seen people that have just changed careers or career life just because of COVID and all that. So we'll continue to play our roles as parents and hope that everything turns out right.
And it will. It's going to, especially with these folks on this panel here between Jenny and Ramatu. Hey, one quick question, then Jenny, and then we're going to move into one of the final questions we want to pose. But really quick, are we encouraging, on everything we've seen, especially the last 2 years, are we encouraging our kids to join the supply chain ranks in their careers, or are we cautioning them more after the last couple of years? Ramatu, what's your answer in a nutshell?
I don't encourage them to join supply chain. I have someone in my house that is claiming to be a supply chain expert, but has never been to supply chain school. And that's Zara. She thinks she's a supply chain expert. And I'm like, well, yes, of course you are. You know, that's how you get it done. So I think by just being out there and talking about it, kids have a way of picking these things up. It's not like I sit them down and say, oh, you have to be supply chain people. No, but now they all want to be supply chain. They see me on supply chain now, like, wow, mommy, that's you. I want to be on supply chain now too. And so if that's what they want to do, of course, I'll support them to do that. Yeah.
Man, that's a beautiful answer. And I like old Zara. I think Zara has got something in common with our middle child, Gracie. You got to fake it till you make it sometimes, right? So, all right. So Jenny, any of your thoughts there? And then of course we can move right into some of these final questions we want to ask Ramatu today.
Yeah, it's really interesting because yes, there was an article written that apparently people are now avoiding supply chain management as a career because the responsibilities are being shown as being too onerous. And certainly in our student conference, somebody was asked, is supply chain management a stressful job? And it was kind of, everybody laughed and sniggered. But, at the end of the day, there are what job isn't stressful sometimes, but yeah, there are moments, I imagine. And somebody went on to talk about how they were juggling port spaces for a ship and what it was containing and how quickly it was going to go off. And I'm sitting there thinking, yes, that's a really good example of a stressful job, makes event management look like a doddle, really. But just talking about our children, and it's a really interesting one because we've got 4 boys. So as the mother of boys, I ask the question always is, are we in danger these days of singling women out too much in the various awards and accolades and things that are going on? And are we at risk of not disempowering, but somehow damaging the confidence of some of our young men coming up through the workforce? And as the mother of daughters and a very strong woman in business, I'm interested to hear what your comments are about that.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Jenny. And I think it's very good to highlight women in supply chain in order to inspire other women to join and reach for the stars. But I also think it depends on your area, I mean, where you're based. So for us in Africa, if you look at the supply chains, you find that women are just not there. Like it's empty, nobody is there. So maybe in Europe, America, it might be a bit different. You have more female representation, but if you look down here, not much of that is happening. So while it's good to showcase more women in order to be able to inspire others, I think it's very important that we explore the barriers that are preventing women from being represented or being at the table. And some of these barriers have to do with their deeper social determinants, such as girl-child education, there's culture, socioeconomic issues, there's poverty, and policies also that do not favor women, such as looking at childcare, so working women and childcare, paid leave, sexual and reproductive health, you look at maternal health, and just so many problems out there that serve as stumbling blocks for women in this industry. I think that's why there's always this need to showcase in order to help more women to come on board, have more diversity, inclusivity, and equity, and all that. But I think you're also right on the other hand, because I think everybody is important, and it's not a binary thing. There's so many other groups out there that have been excluded, vulnerable people. We have physically challenged people that also need to be on board. So we have to be able to keep all that on the horizon, to be able to look at all that and see, okay, so who are the people that have been left out in the supply chains? Do we need to get more of those people on board? And I'm happy that a lot of supply chains are talking about DEI, in their supply chains. It's just starting, but I think it's important. It's important for suppliers. You need to have more representation and diversity in your suppliers, just like we have at the customer end. So as long as our customers are not monolithic, they are diverse, then I think that people that work in the supply chain should equally represent the fabric of our end users. So it's really important. So we have to always check that pulse and make sure that people are not being overlooked. But it's important to look at women because traditionally the policies and the rules and everything do not favor women for now. That's the way I see it.
Jenny?
Great answer. Yeah, great answer. Everything and more, and it forms the basis of about a 3-hour-long conversation, I think.
Yes, very comprehensive answer as well, because
really good.
It's really what it requires, because it's such a there's so much complexity, right? And to truly ensuring opportunity and advancement for all. I mean, it's such a talk about some research that we're gonna have to double down on. I want to get y'all to respond to one other thing, and then we'll wrap and make sure folks know how to connect with you both. So we did an interview that we'll have released by the time this releases, but we sat down with 3 attendees of a recent Women in Manufacturing Summit here in the States, and we sat down and got their key takeaways from the experience. And one of my favorite parts of the conversation that came up, one of our participants said, "You don't need that." I want to shout this loud for folks in the back, for anyone that might be listening. You don't need permission to do what you want to do. You don't need approval. You don't need a permission note signed by your parents or anyone else to do what you want to do with your career. And, I think when I think of the last question to Ramatu and Ramatu, some of your response there, I think that all of us across gender lines, across all the different demographics, I think there is some head trash that says, I need someone's permission to go after what I want to do in this life. And I think when we have that epiphany at some point in our careers that we can do whatever we want to do, right? At least, we may not have the right resources. We may not have, wealth as defined in a lot of different ways, but we're able to pursue it without getting anyone's permission. I think that is a really important message that our listeners, but also the folks in the next generation that are matriculating through high schools or even as far back as elementary schools, they need to know that and need to know it as early in their journeys as possible. Jenny, I'd love for you to respond to that, and Ramatu, then I'll come get your response as well.
Yeah, what I would say is where that's possible, because there are still places where people, and going back to Ramatu's point, women do need permission to do certain things. And I think that there's a difference between having self-belief and knowing that you can achieve anything. And I go back to that advice in the last interview that Ramatu would give to her daughters, which is to believe in yourself and don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. And I think that there's that self-belief that can actually then help you handle if you are in a place where you can't necessarily just be that free spirit. And I think that I've learned it very, very late. I'm still learning it, how to believe in myself. And I think that it's something that, again, as a parent, to be able to instill that in your children is a phenomenal gift.
Well said, Ramatu.
So for me, I see some of these platforms, like what we're doing here today. These are very important for children. I'm assuring you that Zara and others are going to be watching it. And that's very important because the message that they're going to get from such discussions are the kind of things that prepare them for their future. There are things that we don't even say that they're able to interpret and come out of it. And also, I believe other women looking at this show and people that are generally disadvantaged or thinking you need permission to be able to do anything or you need to have certificates. No, you don't. You don't need to have all that. You just need to be able to have value that you can add to other people. And with that, you should be able to forge ahead. And it's also important to know that. So for me, one of the things, I get asked questions. So people ask me, so how are you able to do all these? You're so good and all that. I tell them, no, I'm not that good. I'm just learning every day. And I don't wait for it to be perfect. You know, if you ask me to come on, if Scott is inviting me, you know, I have to do some research and read around and do all that. But I also just show up. So it's important for us to show up, just be there. If you've not gotten it perfect, just go there and be open to absorbing that experience. So I try to do that. Even for this PhD, I've seen that with some of my colleagues, and they think, okay, PhDs are very difficult. They are not, I'm not saying it's not difficult, but I try to have fun in whatever I do. So I don't let the difficult part bog me down. I try to look at it, oh, this is an experience. So what are the other things I need to be doing apart from literature review and data collection? Oh, there's some gala night or something I need to be doing. Networking, very important, meeting people that are different from you. And those are the experiences that I take with me. So I believe everybody can adopt that attitude, being open to learning and just letting go of whatever is holding you up.
Love that. All right. So what I heard in both of your responses is that we want individuals to embrace that mentality. However, as leaders, we've got to find those obstacles and invest in a successful, effective approaches to obliterating those obstacles across the industry that unfortunately still remain. So well said, Jenny and Ramatu. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. I always want to bolt on a few more hours, right?
I know.
But nonetheless, so what I want to do here as we start to wrap, first off, Jenny, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. Out of all that we've walked through here today with the one and only Ramatu Abdulkadir, what was your favorite thing that she has shared here today, Jenny?
Oh, there's just so much, so much. And there always is so much. But I think that, you know, for me, it's not what you said, it's kind of what you demonstrate, and that's your love and your pride for your daughters. I think that shines through every time you mention one of their names. So for me, that's the thing, is that you can, and I think I'm always reminded of it, Ramatu, when I meet you, is that you can be an incredibly successful individual in your chosen field, but you can still be gracious, warm, and loving. And it doesn't mean that you have to be a fierce, strong, you know, you can do your job effectively by still being the essence of you. So thank you always for reminding me of that.
Love that.
Thank you, Jay.
And the passion for industry and the passion for moving the industry forward in the current challenges and beyond. I think that's what sticks out to me. So, hey, Ramatu, how can our listeners connect with you and some of these cool things you're doing?
Thank you, Scott. That's very important. Like I told you, I enjoy meeting people and just sharing ideas and all that. So I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. I try to be everywhere also, but I'm more active on some social media sites than others. But if you can hit me up on any of them, we're sure to continue this discussion.
Love that. Thank you so much, Ramatu. And Jenny, same question. You and the SAPIX team continue to do some big things, helping folks across Africa and really beyond, frankly. I really enjoyed that young professional event that y'all hosted. How can folks connect with you?
Yeah, same as Ramatu, very active on LinkedIn and Twitter predominantly. And really anything that Scott tweets, look out for it, because I'll retweet it. Unless it's about baseball, at which point I kind of glaze over a bit.
Well, and sapix.org.
And
right?
sapix.org.
And that's just
SAPICS.
I was about to say that, because if you spell poorly like I do, you need SAPICS.
You put an X in inevitably.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, hey, that sense of humor is so important. I circle back to it. I really enjoy, you got to enjoy what you do, but then there's times where you got to really lean in and find a way to get a giggle or a laugh. And I want to wrap on this before we say a bid adieu to both y'all. So, Blockbuster and Netflix had a strong competition way back in the day, right? Blockbuster, of course, was the dominant video rental player at the time that was really committed to VHS tapes and and that physical medium. And of course, Netflix was the upstart. Netflix disrupted everything, and now it's been reported they're worth about $230 billion. Netflix. But Jenny, Ramatu, for a time there, they were fierce competitors. And Reed Hastings, who co-founded Netflix, was being interviewed back in the early 2000s of how Blockbuster was coming after Netflix. And he said something like, they're throwing everything at us, but the kitchen sink, right? And he was on an analyst call, so it was public. So the very next day, Reed Hastings shows up at his office, and the folks at Blockbuster had sent him a kitchen sink sitting there at his office, and if two fierce rivals can have that degree of kind of enjoying the journey, enjoying the competition, having a little bit of fun, hey, all the rest of us can. So maintain that sense of humor. But hey, most importantly, be like Ramatu and Jenny, and the world's going to be a better place. And on that note, I want to challenge you. Hey, on behalf of our entire team here at Supply Chain Now, Scott Luton signing off for now. Do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. Be just like Ramatu and Jenny. And we'll see you next time right back here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being a part of our Supply Chain Now community. Check out all of our programming at supplychainnow.com and make sure you subscribe to Supply Chain Now anywhere you listen to podcasts. And follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. See you next time on Supply Chain Now.